Hello there, this is Fiona, host and main GM for What Am I Rolling, a twice-monthly RPG one-shot podcast. This is a bonus Q&A episode to tide us over to the next one-shot. And it is indeed a very special Q&A, as this week I had the absolute pleasure of interviewing Quinn Majeski, the showrunner of the Monster Hour podcast and game designer behind Absurdia, a tabletop role-playing game about absurd humour and surreal horror. Absurdia is a modern fantasy role-playing game about the inane hilarity and understated horror of everyday life. Inspired by works like Welcome to Night Vale, Alice in Wonderland, Gravity Falls, and The Twilight Zone, Absurdia is an opportunity to indulge in the surreal and the outlandish, whilst subverting the absurdity of modern society. In Absurdia, players take on the roles of peculiar residents of an unassuming suburban town turned upside down by entropic chaos. They'll contend with occult bureaucracy, a megalomaniacal PTA, sentient cars, malevolent garden flora, a non-Euclidean network of back alleys, and the occasionally extradimensional cosmic horror in a darkly idyllic community. It was an absolute delight to interview Quinn about his work on Absurdia, and this powered by the apocalypse inspired game ticks all the boxes for it. The metaphysical edition of Absurdia is currently being crowdfunded on BackerKit all the way through to October 17th. So, if you enjoy this interview, consider going to support it and grabbing your own copy. You can also listen to Absurdia being played and developed over on the Monster Hour podcast. It is the main system they use for their Season 2 campaign. I'll put a link to the podcast, the BackerKit, and all the relevant things in this episode's show notes. We're going to start off really nice and simply. Could you introduce yourself to our wonderful audience? Who are you and what do you do?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I am Quinn Majeski. I am a game designer and an actual play podcaster based in the Pacific Northwest. On the game design front, I am the designer behind Absurdia, which is what we're talking about today, a absurdist tabletop role-playing game about the inane hilarity and mundane horror of everyday life, drawing inspiration from absurdist works across different mediums like Welcome to Night Vale, Alice in Wonderland, and Gravity Falls. On the podcasting front, I am the recovering, as of season 3, the recovering forever GM. I was the GM of our first 2 seasons, and I'm now a player and producer of an actual play podcast called Monster Hour. We started in our first season playing Monster of the Week, as many podcasts do these days. In our second season, we did play Absurdia, and we are currently playing City of Mist by Son of Oak Games.
Amazing. Well, congratulations on getting out of the Forever GM's chair. I know it's hard to do that, but well done. So, yeah, always my first question is, but how did you get into tabletop role-playing games? Were you a player to begin with? Like, what's your origin story?
I was a player the first time that I played. I had a friend in, gosh, was it middle school or was it elementary? It was a while ago. I don't quite remember. I think it was elementary school.
The eons of time behind you. Yes.
I think it was late elementary school, whose dad played Dungeons and Dragons. I want to say 2nd edition. Because I don't think we had reached 3.0 yet. And he ran a couple games for us. And then I obviously was really into it. I really enjoyed it. And so for many, many years, I was the dungeon master for a group of friends throughout middle school and high school. And then kind of, after college or during college, friends all went to different places, stepped away from not like dramatically, but just kind of stopped playing tabletop games for a while. And then picked it back up in 2015 or so with Dungeons and Dragons. And then started as I learned about more indie tabletop role-playing games through a lot of actual play podcasts, started playing them, played Monster of the Week, deeply enjoyed it, convinced, tricked some of my friends into a few one-shots, and then said, hey, there's this thing called actual play podcasts. Actually, they introduced me to actual play podcasts. That's
you reframing it to them. You're like, yes. Hey,
I turned it around on them and said, hey, this really cool thing that you introduced me to, we could do this and we should do this because it would be a lot of fun. And that's how we started Monster Hour.
Amazing. And so, like, obviously, it sounds like a lot of people, I will say, that I've talked to on this podcast, started off with Dungeons and Dragons and high fantasy, and interestingly, also have the break around college. Like, there's always like breaks somewhere, which I always find really interesting. Mm-hmm. What is it like? Obviously, I know with like Monster Hour and obviously Absurdia, like they're not fantasy in that, that sort of the Dungeons and Dragons sort of sense. So do you have a particular genre that you prefer to play in or run, or is it just like whatever is like flavor of the week for you? Like, as a storyteller, what's your favorite genre to play or run in?
I mean, I do love to dabble all over the place. I haven't done as much sort of high fantasy or even low fantasy. In recent years, I got, I played a lot of that over my life, but the genre that I really enjoy and come back to a lot is like urban fantasy or modern fantasy. So fantasy in sort of what we would describe as modern times, that, very much is Monster of the Week, drawing on influences like Supernatural, like Buffy, where you have fantasy elements like, angels and demons and all sorts of monsters, but they're taking place in modern times. Like our current game of Monster Hour, City of Mist, where you have again, set in sort of like a modern but noir inspired setting, but you do have these, mythos, be they supernatural or mythological or even historical figures awakening in sleepers throughout the city, and that sort of dealing with that duality of mundane versus supernatural in a modern setting. Mm-hmm. But, Absurdia, although it is a bit different, does fall within that genre. It is the sort of core setting. I think there's a lot of flexibility in Absurdia to go different directions, and we can talk about that a little bit later. But the core setting is this sort of like surreal suburbia, maybe dated 10, 20 years back, but the timeline is sort of nebulous. But this town that is upside down, that is chaotic and unpredictable and whimsical and terrifying, like your Welcome to Night Vale, sort of a strange exurb in the desert, or like, Gravity Falls, this idyllic but very, supernatural community in the Oregon forest. Like, that is definitely still within sort of the urban fantasy genre that I really like to run and enjoy.
Yeah, that's one thing I wanted to quickly talk about actually with Absurdia. This idea of like urban horror being unsettling to the outsider, right? Because we can listen to Welcome to Night Vale or Gravity Falls and all that sort of thing, and we go, this is not right, in the sense of like, this is unusual. But in Absurdia and in all these other places, if you are a resident there, if you're a citizen in these places, it isn't. It's just part of life that you have to sort of navigate around. And maybe you have a character or two that is like, wait, this can't be right, and like maybe breaks the mold, but that's not what the players are doing in this. So let's go on to that a little bit. So what is Absurdia, for those people who don't know what it is, and how does it differ from other TTRPG games that are already out there? Yeah,
absolutely. So as I said earlier, Absurdia is a absurdist tabletop role-playing game. It is about a strange and surreal and very, very secluded, to the point that nobody can leave, suburban town. And you really hit on it. The core premise, or one of the core premises of Absurdia, is this inversion of the notion of a lot of tabletop role-playing games where there are strange and surreal and supernatural things happening, and most people don't know about them. Mm-hmm. They're kept secret and hidden, whether that is by, some shadowy government agency that's sweeping them under the rug, or, like monster hunters who are dealing with these threats before people get them, or like in City of Mist, the veil that sort of keeps sleepers asleep and prevents them from seeing these things. Absurdia turns that on its head and says, no, everything is so weird that what is supernatural or otherworldly is pedestrian, mundane. And the things that are truly terrifying are what we sort of in our everyday life would consider to be mundane, to be run of the mill, whether that, is an automobile, which, we drive every day, but imagine in Absurdia is, a ferocious wild creature with the sentience of an animal, or whether that is, something like the glow cloud from Welcome to Night Vale, or like this screaming fog, this is sort of entropic, otherworldly phenomena, being sort of run of the mill. That's really the central premise of Absurdia, is like, we have taken the weird and we've put it to the forefront, and we are subverting our expectations of what is normal.
Yeah, and I will say it kind of hit home for me personally, because it is very American. Obviously, I know they've got references anyway, and obviously I know, like HOA and all that sort of thing. But it's that idea of like a small isolated town that's very far away. And I've recently moved to the US from a busy capital city, and like lots of stuff here. Yeah, exactly. A big nod there. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, it's that sort of thing where it's like small town sort of attitudes about things. To me, coming from a place that, is like, oh, it's bustling, whatever, to come here and like, whoa, this is such a different disparity, that sort of disconnect from myself. And then that seeps in that sort of the unsettlingness of it. So I would say, like, it's not true horror. I know some people maybe there's tropes of horror, right? But it's not like,
yes.
I feel like, and that's something you definitely put into the book, and it's something I just said about, like, you are a resident here. You're not trying to escape. You are here now. This is your life now. And, what comes after it? Because I think a lot of people might mistake that in a way, like, well, we have to get out. There's something wrong with the town. We need to prove it's wrong. It's like, no. We're now this community, and we need to help each other and navigate around these different disturbances, and how, and play that out. And I think that's just such a nice, sort of refreshing way of looking at things. Because I think a lot of people will be like, well, small town, oh, it's clearly bad. There's clearly stuff going on. It's almost like a in my head when I was reading through the book Needful Things by Stephen King came to mind. That idea of, like, again, and I can imagine that being like a sort of disturbance or an encounter that your players have to deal with, and that idea of, like, a shop appears and then it's, whatever you want is there, but then you can the only way you can get it is by playing off the different factions and all that sort of thing. And so, yeah, I could see myself going, oh yeah, there's these different things you can do based in the mundane, in quotation marks there. And I just thought it was just really interesting and very different, because, again, like a lot of games now, it feels very heroic. We must fight this. And it's like, no, we are here now. How can we navigate a day-to-day life?
An excellent summary, as good or better as I could have done, certainly. Yeah, I mean, that is really, a core element is, like, this town is your world. Like, it's strange and surreal and at times incredibly dangerous, but also, there is fun and whimsy and small C community. I say that because in Absurdia there are sort of 4 factions that are designed to kind of play out the social dynamics, the big picture social dynamics and small town politics of sort of surreal suburbia, and one of them is capital C community. But there is that element to be had here, and this notion of, like, there is a trope of, like, the bad small town that you need to escape or perhaps overcome. Usually it's escape, but it's not really, as you said, how Absurdia plays. This is the place that you live, and it's got problems or challenges or, things to persevere. But it's not something that you're trying to escape from. It's so interesting, actually, that you brought up Needful Things and this notion of, like, that is like a disturbance. There is a playbook in Absurdia. I tried to draw from a lot of different absurdist touchstones and capture some of these in the archetypes. But there's a playbook in Absurdia called The Curio, which is about a person who collects cursed objects, basically. And one of the touchstones is Leland Gaunt from Needful Things. So that's such an interesting parallel that you discovered there.
Like you said, you've got these inspirations from, like, Welcome to Night Vale and obviously Gravity Falls. I guess, what inspired you to start writing Absurdia? Like, so you said you were running Monster of the Week, and then you went into running your own game. Like, was it something that you always had in mind, that I want to write a game about something? Like, yeah, what was that sort of process for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people say this. I never expected to, like, I didn't plot out to get into game design. Like, I definitely enjoy playing them, but it's not something that I was like, I'm going to be a game designer.
Sure. As
we were, in season 1 of Monster Hour, we do outside of our like big chunky seasons, we do, one shots, and I'm always brainstorming things for like Patreon games or just things to play at like, home tables. And, I had this idea of like, I kind of wanted to, at this point, the influence was a little bit more Alice in Wonderland, but I had sort of, I was thinking about the parallels, despite them being, different. I would say not usually lumped together, Welcome to Night Vale and Alice in Wonderland, but there are a lot of like parallels and through lines with the absurdist tone and content therein, even though they're kind of set in slightly different settings. And so I was thinking, well, I want to do a game that's, kind of like this, about this, strange secluded town where things are upside down and topsy-turvy, and the mayor is a cat, and there are talking mushrooms and things like that. And I did what I always do when I'm looking for like a game, is I go and look, and I didn't really find anything. The closest thing, this was back in probably 2020 or 2021. The closest thing that I could find was Troika, which is a great game, but not quite what I was looking for.
That's definitely, that's that on the sort of bonkers scale. In living terms, bonkers, that is like off the chart, and
yes,
not necessarily
not
one really necessary for longer term play as well, which is what Absurdia feels like to me.
Yeah, I really, when it comes to, I was coming to this from an actual play perspective. And I know Powered by the Apocalypse has its, its proponents and its detractors, and it's not good for everything. But I think it is really great for actual play in terms of, being easy, not just for the players to tell and the game master or master of ceremonies, whatever it is for the appropriate game, to tell a story and keep things moving in a way that is interesting and has like a strong, compelling narrative, but also for, folks who are listening along to like pick up the rules and then learn the rules through actual play. So I was coming at this from a perspective of like, it doesn't have to be Powered by the Apocalypse, which is the system that Absurdia uses, but that would be nice because I think, I'd like to play this on mic. And I think it's a really strong system for doing that. And so not able to find something, I started making something. And that's where Absurdia was born and came from.
Was it all sort of very much fleshed out before you started doing season 2 of Monster Hour, or was it an ongoing process so the podcast was happening whilst you were writing and vice versa?
I call it now the term that I have discovered for it. At the time, I didn't know what it was, but we launched season 2 of Monster Hour with Absurdia in what I would call now an ashcan. So at the time, I just called it, version 0.9 or early access.
Yeah.
And so it was, it was largely done. It had gone through, a fair amount of playtesting at that point, but it didn't have a lot of the illustrations and the graphic design and the section for game masters because I was going to be running it.
Yeah, you knew what you wanted to do.
I was doing. And so when we first launched season 2 of Monster Hour playing Absurdia, it was mostly done, but not quite done. And that also did provide an opportunity for me to do a really like extended playtest, testing out, because season 2 of Monster Hour wound up being 51 episodes long. Powered by the Apocalypse, I think, is a great system for one shots, but also is usually, not always, but often, and Absurdia is built for, extended play, multiple disturbances, longer story arcs, that sort of thing. And so that did provide an opportunity for me to play test a lot of the things like advancement and longer term narrative developments for the playbooks. And last year I released the 1.0 version, the sort of complete game with all of the advice for game masters on how to bring the absurdity to your table and sort of advice for how to turn things on its head. Ever since I put out the game, there were folks who were interested in a print run, a physical copy of it. As a baby game designer, I was really reticent to build the game while I was flying it, so to speak. But since putting out the 1.0 version, I've been meeting with folks in the industry, doing a lot of research on crowdfunding and printing and all that sort of thing. And so I'm now really excited to be bringing Absurdia to backer kit for what I'm dubbing the metaphysical edition.
That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, I was going to say, like, what I really liked about this is going to be like the compliment river, by the way. You're going to get lots of compliments now, so you're going to have to take it now. What I really liked about, the running the game section, it feels like a lot of the advice about, obviously, and that's why I wanted to ask about the podcast and stuff, because it feels like, oh, I've learned this through running games, but also running this particular game. And I think it's written in such a beautiful way that it's easily accessible. And actually the whole section about like ending your game, having that conversation with your players about like, how do we want to continue and all that sort of thing. It felt, wow, we don't have those kinds of sections in other RPGs, right? And it's because it's not like there's like a big sort of climax, we've got like countdowns and encounters and disturbances, and like you've got all that sort of stuff. But actually just like, how do you end a story? And how do you have those conversations with players? Because it's, usually what happens, and I'm taking the inspiration here from D&D, is that you get to level 20 and fight a big boss and you're done. Whereas obviously that's not the case in Absurdia, because obviously, there is big bads in quotation marks, but it's, about like, how do you continue after these things happen, right? Say you manage to defeat whatever it is, the monster or the individual, or you finish the quest, you still continue on, and it's about whether or not when you want to wrap it up. It reminded me a little bit of Stewpot, which I don't know if you've heard of at all.
Yeah. It's on my to playlist. It sounds like a really rad game.
Yeah, so just for the listeners, what's really interesting about it is that Stewpot isn't necessarily a fully fledged TTRPG in the sense that we would know it, but it's the idea of like you are a retired adventurer and you're now running a tavern, and each of the scenes are almost like little mini games with different sort of like prompts and stuff like that, and you go through about, I think, 6 of them around the table, and then you go, do we want to finish here? Great. And it's the idea of transitioning from one state to, like, this is who you were, into who you are now, and dealing with that sort of transition of like, oh, I need to adapt and change now. And I think this is the same here with Absurdia, is that, to a certain point, you'll have done stuff and you'll have done your character development arcs, but it's not like, and you can die, I will say, in Absurdia. You can be written
very
out.
Possible.
Very, very possible. But it's not like, and now we all live happily ever after. It's just like we are happy, and that's it. You continue on. So I really wanted to commend you on that sort of ending a game session, because I feel like we don't talk about how do we do it, because often what happens, more often than not, is unfortunately it's outside influences, right? Mm-hmm. People can't make the session, or there's an argument or something, and it just falls away just due to other circumstances. But what I liked is that you were like, okay, maybe we only have one more session. Let's do this. And I just wanted to commend you on that writing, because not a lot of RPGs do that. And I just felt like with the writing in general, in that running the game section was really, it felt like your experiences were being put in there into such a wonderful way. And that, again, I keep going around it, but like not other TTRPGs do that.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. It is a privilege to end a game. I think I have finished 3 campaigns in my entire time in, playing tabletop role-playing games, 1 D&D, and then the 2 seasons of Monster Hour that we have run. And so I do think about that a lot. And, when you do have the privilege of ending a longer running campaign, I think it's really challenging in a lot of ways. And when doing Monster Hour season 1 and 2, I thought a lot about when and how to end a story, because it is, it's deeply bittersweet. But in my mind, and I think for a lot of people, seeing a show or like a book, or it happens most often with TV shows, let's be honest, but like the opposite problem of things being canceled too early is seeing a show that you love just sort of unravel and fall apart. Mm-hmm. And so finding a way to tie things up and end things in a way that is narratively satisfying is something that I think about a lot and is really important to me. And so thanks for noticing that section.
but it's when you say you've done 51 episodes using your system, right? And developing it all the way through. Like, let's face it, there are some big TTRPG shows out there, Critical Role, for example, who, they do hundreds and hundreds of episodes using D&D, And then they'll develop their own system and they go, but we don't trust it enough to do a long-term campaign, so we'll go back to D&D. And it's that sort of thing where, why don't we just try it and find out? And then be able to do a beautifully narrative story that goes for 51 episodes and naturally end without it being all about numbers. It just goes to show that, I think, it's interesting. I always think that people really want to have these amazing collaborative stories and really want to be able to come together and work on it and not realize how much time it's taken. Like for me, for example, I've done lots of 6 to 8 episode things just now because that's just the amount of time we have people for when we're doing other things, which is totally fine. But there's something amazing about like, okay, we have upwards of 10 sessions, nebulous, star when we finish.
10 plus.
But then it's like, wow, we've got to explore these characters and indulge is the word I'm thinking of here. But
yes,
it's not
absolutely
selfish. It means that we can have a richer story and then we learn so much. And then by the end you go, wow, we got here all the way from over there, pointing off camera to and what a beautiful way we got there. And I think because we're in a world right now which is like, it's prioritizing like efficiency and like getting a story within a 90-minute time frame, and it's just like
8-episode series.
Yeah, it's just like slow burn in the if it's done right, it's just beautiful. I want more slow burn in my life.
It is very tough, because a lot of listeners, viewers, audience in general across mediums, genres want things to be punchy and to kind of like hit hard right away and deliver. And that, number one, it's really hard to do.
Yes.
Number two, you really don't get the time to, I love that, indulge. You don't get the time to indulge in, a longer, slower burn development of characters and story arcs. And I guess I would just completely agree. I think being able to tell those longer form stories, it certainly brings me a lot of joy to tell them, and I really enjoy listening to them.
To go back to Absurdia properly now, rather than me just spouting my philosophy and stuff, I wanted to talk about the playbooks in general. So was there a particular playbook that you really love, or one that took a bit more time to go through? Like, obviously we've got quite a number of them. You mentioned the Curio just there, but is there one that you're like, I really love this one, and like would play it yourself? I know you've probably done playtests of it with yourself, but is there one that you like come back to all the time?
I'm gonna cheat and choose 2.
Perfect. You can do that. You can do that. You are the game designer, though.
One of them is also the one that took me the longest to sort of iron out the details for. So one of the very first ones that I came up with is a playbook called the Bureaucracy, which is basically a occult, arcane imbued bureaucrat. It draws inspiration from the vague yet menacing government agency, Welcome to Night Vale. A lot of things from various Discworld books in particular, like Going Postal, Making Money, Hermes Conrad from Futurama.
Yes.
I talked earlier about like, I see a lot of absurdist through lines between things like, kind of classic literary nonsense like Alice in Wonderland and more modern presentations like Welcome to Night Vale or King Falls or Wolf 359. But the sort of third leg of the stool, I guess, so to speak, there's a lot of absurdism in like Western animation, which I don't think is talked about a lot. And actually a lot of like Absurdia's touchstones are drawn from not just, Gravity Falls, but Adventure Time, Futurama, they're very absurd shows when you think about it.
For sure.
Sorry. Brief aside over. The Bureaucracy, one of the first playbooks that I sort of conceived, near and dear to my heart, because in my day job, I work for local government. I am a bureaucrat. And so this notion of like, yes, they're a bureaucrat, but also all of these, things like red tape and analysis paralysis are taken to sort of the literary or literal absurdist means of like, oh, they can actually ensnare people in red tape or hypnotize people by droning on about the municipal code. And it's a very fun playbook, and also just, given my background, one of my personal favorites. I would say the other one that I really obviously I'm fond of all of them. They're great. They all rule. The other one that I particularly enjoy, and also the one that really took the longest to kind of iron out from a lot of the mechanical standpoints is a playbook called the Zeitgeist, which is a playbook where you play as a hive mind, like you play as a collective consciousness. It draws inspiration from, again, a lot of different touchstones, but like Troy Walsh, especially in the Welcome to Night Vale book, I think the first one, I know there's a couple now, but also like Unity from Rick and Morty, this notion of like you are a collective consciousness that inhabits multiple, generally human, although not required, bodies. And it's oftentimes either a villain or like portrayed in a villainous light, but I think, it offers a really interesting opportunity as a player. Again, it took me a while to kind of figure things out, but the Zeitgeist is a lot of fun because you control, you play 4 people, potentially 5 as you sort of advance. So you're not taking over the town, but you do have the ability to like split up, be multiple places at once, and each of your being able to split up means like, if one of your bodies gets incapacitated, you're okay. And so the playbook is really mechanically is all about the tension between the benefits of like dividing and conquering. You can go gather information, you can keep yourself safe, versus the benefits of like being close together and having all of your bodies present in a scene where you can be, you can use them all and be more effective. And I think it presents a really interesting and unique opportunity for players of the Zeitgeist playbook.
I really love that idea. Like, again, it just breaks that mold of like you can be anything in an RPG, but like more so than a different lineage. For example, obviously like D&D is like, oh, you could be a dragonborn, you could be a tiefling, but here it's like you could be literally consciousness. It reminds me of there's an RPG called Idris Bai, which again is a surrealist RPG of like the center of town is very physical and it's there, but the further you go out, it's more whimsical, it sort of starts to unravel a little bit. And in it, the character creation is like, you can be whatever you want. Do you want to be a cartoon? Do you want to be a concept? Do you want to be just a color? That's fine. And then all of your skills are just like, it's all like yes and no cards, prompts, essentially. It's like, do you, as a character, a cartoon character, for example, how do you get through the door? Oh, well, it's locked. I'm going to make myself 2D and slide underneath it, all that sort of thing.
Yes.
And so I love the fact you could do the similar stuff here at Absurdia, that you're not constrained to like, I am a humanoid, this is me person. But at the same time, I love the idea of being a bureaucracy, because it's true. I like how it's like, God, you got all this stuff in your head, and it would be like, it is mundane, 9 to 5, all this stuff. But what if you use it as a power? What if it's not a weakness or a dullness? It is something unique about you. And I just really think that's just awesome as a result. And it makes it exciting to play. Because in other games, again, I keep going back to the whole idea of like D&D, oh, you're heroes, you're this. What if you're just a normal person in extraordinary circumstances? So you are a mundane character in this extraordinary world of Absurdia, but you've got, because of that, you are very powerful here. And I just think a lot of people maybe miss that, perhaps, because maybe we're like, well, this is the mundane life that we're living in, the real life. And I don't feel special, or I don't feel like, this. So therefore, I want to play these extraordinary characters in ordinary settings. Whereas I think there's something really delicious about playing another mundane character in an extraordinary setting, if you see what I mean. Yeah,
I completely agree. It ties back to the sort of overarching element of Absurdia of like making the normal, surreal and or terrifying and or whimsical, and making the otherworldly very mundane. And so it definitely like plays on that theme.
Yeah.
I would also add, like, it ties into another element of Absurdia that we haven't talked about yet, which is like playbooks. Like they have a sort of traditional harm track. Like, yes, you can certainly get hurt or die. It's well within the realm of possibility in a game so strange. But the piece that I like more, and I think is more interesting to play with, is the second track, which is called Essence. Each playbook has its own sort of like specific essence. So like, we talked about the Bureaumancer before. The Bureaumancer's essence is capital, like political capital, that, they sort of, derive from City Hall, from the bureaucracy to pull off these feats. The Zeitgeist essence is harmony within the collective. Another playbook that I really like to talk about in this game because it is such a cornerstone is the Vox, which is like the community radio host, like the Cecil Gershwin Palmer, Sammy Stevens, Douglas Eiffel. Their whole thing is like drawing strength from the regular elements of the town. Their essence is integrity, this notion that they, are a trusted source of truth and seek it out, and are there to stand up for sort of the normal people in town. Each of these playbooks has this essence, which represents this particular aspect of, yes, you're like a resident of this town. You're not a superhero, but you do have something. There is like a little special spark that allows you to go out and address these disturbances, these events that take place in town. And each playbook is a little different, and represents what makes that playbook unique, and also, powerful in a sense.
Just to go back to your Alice in Wonderland thing, I think the big thing about Alice in Wonderland, now that I think about it, is that the protagonist, Alice, is just curious. She's not scared or worried or that she's always wants to know more. And I think playing that into the playbooks and these essences, it's that sort of thing where it's like, well, okay, I'm a radio host, or I'm I work for the city council. And it's like, yeah, but what if, be curious about it. Be like, what is it that makes it unique and special? And it's like, yeah, you've got this capital, you've got this integrity. And I think what I hope that people would get from playing Absurdia is that outside of it, and I'm always talking about transferable skills, is how boring and business-minded I am now, is that obviously playing role-playing games, there's transferable skills all over life. But I just like the idea that you could be talking to people at a networking event or a small party, and you ask someone what they do. And then it's like, oh, this person is, works for the city council. Right, so they've got, you can start to imagine, like, okay, they've got these unique bits about them. And just again, I appreciate that was maybe it's making it all gamified your life, but it's just like, there's more to a person, and maybe, it doesn't engage you or excite you as much, but I just like the idea of a game that makes you curious to play these characters that, again, aren't the traditional, like, high status fantasy, we'll go, or the low status murder hobos, you know what I mean? Like, it's like, these roles in a society that we might not play ourselves, but we might do later on. Who knows, where we end up. So, yeah, I just thought that was really, I just realised that now, is that, the Alice in Wonderland for me is, as well as the topsy-turvy, like, everything's strange here, but it's also like curiosity. You're not frightened by it. You embrace it to a certain extent.
Yeah, absolutely.
What would you say then, this is like a two-part question now, what would you say then was the most difficult part about developing this game? Was there a particular obstacle or something that you're like, shoot, how am I gonna cross this? And then was there a bit, how did you manage to get around it?
For me, I think I've been playing and running tabletop role-playing games so long, I have a real challenge writing the, like, what this is, like, what is a tabletop role-playing game? I do think a lot, not all, but a lot of folks who come and play, arrive at indie tabletop role-playing games often come from Dungeons and Dragons or, another sort of popular system. And so it's not always necessary to explain, like, what a tabletop role-playing game is, but it's got to go in there in case this is someone's first, like, I feel almost an obligation. Like, if for some reason Absurdia is the first book that you pick up and you don't know what a tabletop role-playing game is, I gotta do the best job ever of explaining what it is, so that you have the metaphorical person out there, have a warm introduction to a hobby that's incredibly near and dear to my heart. But I've been doing it for so long that it was very challenging. I read a lot, like a ton of other, books looking like, how do I explain this thing that lives in my head? And has been there for so long that it's like background noise.
It's an interesting one because most RPGs will now have that section of what is a role-playing game, and some will be like 2 or 3 pages, some will be a small paragraph. And I think, there's not one way of, like, describing it. As you said, it's like, you just have to experience it, and then and that is what a role-playing game is. But obviously, like, how do you put it into, in case people don't get to experience it? Some people, just read TTRPG books, right? They don't get to a wonderful chance to be able to play these games. So I agree. I think it's also frustrating in a way because that's often the first thing that people are going to read first. Obviously they're starting at the beginning, so it has to be there, and you're like, I need to set a good impression for the rest of the book so that they continue. And so, I think it's one of the most difficult things as well. The flip side of this question, then, what was something that you really enjoyed about developing this game? Was just something that either was it a faction or a playbook that you, when you were writing it or thinking about it, or even like obviously running it on Monster Hour, you're like, this is amazing, and it almost like sparked that creative joy in you as a game developer.
All the playbooks. I can't pick just one, but I mean, I think playbooks and basic moves or moves, I guess in general, are like they're the core of a Powered by the Apocalypse system. And I had so much fun making all of the Absurdia playbooks. And I think they're all very unique. They draw on a wide range of different Absurdist touchstones across different media. And they have just like strange, bizarre abilities that are so much fun to implement. The metaphysical edition, the version of Absurdia, which is going to be crowdfunding on BackerKit, or maybe is crowdfunding now, depending when this episode comes out. There are going to be 3 new playbooks. One of them is called The Newcomer, and it is that sort of like that one person who thinks that everything is strange because they have just arrived. Alice from Alice in Wonderland does sort of lean in pretty heavily, but like Alice from Alice in Wonderland, like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz,
yes,
like Carlos the Scientist, and some of the earlier episodes of Welcome to Night Vale, like what on earth is happening here?
Yes.
What is happening? And The Newcomer has a move called Just a Little Guy. Because you're just a little guy. If you're in danger, you can, throw yourself on the ground in mercy and plead that you are just a little guy and that it is your birthday, and roll plus cheek, which is the sort of like social, like how cheeky are you, and protect yourself as a character who, is deeply squishy, to use sort of like a classic tabletop parlance. But all of these playbooks have that's one of the newer and one of my favorite examples, but all these playbooks have these just like, very absurd in sort of the lowercase a, in addition to the uppercase A, very absurd abilities that are just so much fun in play.
Obviously, playbooks in general in Powered by Apocalypse games allow players to shine. But I think with all the playbooks you have, and then these 3 new ones as well, what I'm excited for is that just the random combinations of things you can have as players, and obviously encouraging people to really go into for the tropes, go into these archetypes and really experiment, and then seeing that combination as a team, right? Like again, there's no like normal setup, as you would say, like again in the D&D party, of like, oh, there's a fighter, there's this. No, you could be any of these. As a result, the stories that you can create are going to be really exciting and unique. And it's that sort of thing where you wouldn't experience this otherwise. And again, I think it's a good testament as well to that idea of like, this is an everyday suburban town that's weird, yes. Which is not the best definition of it, but it's like, of course, there's not going to be a traditional, and now they do this, and that, it's about the characters themselves. I think that's the thing I always think about with games, is that, you as a storyteller can have like set up these disturbances, right? You can set up these, different quests or adversaries or anything like that. But it's up to the players of how they deal with it. And, it's what they're interested in. Whereas other RPGs, it's like, well, here's the module you have to play. Here's this. And I think that's the other thing I wanted to say, was that what I've really appreciated about Absurdia, in the PDF that I was reading, is that it gives suggestions for things like locations and like, NPCs and like disturbances themselves, this idea of different encounters that you could have and the categorization of these disturbances. But it wasn't like, okay, and now here is the adventure for you to play through, because ultimately, and I think this is the thing about Powered by Apocalypse games, it's kind of determined on what the players would like to do, and you are reacting to what they are doing rather than they're being proactive, you are reactive. And I think that scares people sometimes, but actually trusting players to do the big swings, to be like, what are you interested in? And you've picked these playbooks and they had these sort of moves and these things that they're interested in. Right. I can then set up these little things and then we can fill in the gaps as we go. And I think that's what excites me about this, is that because you have these amazing, unusual playbooks and the way they interact, it's just almost like unlimited combinations of what kind of stories you can create. And it doesn't matter whether you're like, oh, is that a good story or not? It doesn't matter. You get to explore it and then it's your story.
Yeah, absolutely. And my goal in Absurdia is to provide the tools with the GM, or to provide the GM with the tools to create disturbances, you know, that makes sense at their table. There are examples in the book.
Yes.
And, you know, one of the stretch goals that I'm, you know, hoping to hit for the campaign would be to provide some like ready-made disturbances as an option. Cause, you know, I do think it's helpful, even if you don't use them, just to like see what they are, and to bring some guest writers in who have a different perspective than me and can, you know, present their own sort of take on, you know, the setting and the game and absurdist scenario. But the goal of the book is to provide the GM with the tools to, you know, help create disturbances that are interesting to the players and to their characters. And also the player section, the GM section, the rules themselves emphasize, and I try to, you know, hit home on this point as much as possible throughout the text. It's meant to be a collaborative game. Mm-hmm. Absurdism works best when everyone at the table is throwing out their weird and wild ideas, you know, really embracing like this notion of yes and, because in a world where, or in a world where the sidewalk might swallow you up or the moon might berate you on your walk to work, this notion that only the game master can come up with a good idea is so farcical. Like, and it really, not only does it take like a lot of the pressure off of the shoulders of the game master, but like it just works better when, you know, everyone is contributing their own weird and wild ideas to the game.
Yeah. You say that with the, you know, if they want to go do something and they want to use, you know, a rival, you know, okay, well, describe the rival for me. Oh, I don't know. Like, again, a lot of games are encouraging this more and more, but what I liked about it was like, you almost giving permission for GMs to be like, do ask the players questions and like allow them to make stuff up about this weird town, because as you said, this town is part of it is theirs as well, and it's all very well like keeping it all up here, you know, templed fingers GM style, but actually sharing it with other people is that you get so many more interesting, weird, absurd sort of stories. There's like a thing in improv. I think it's Keith Johnston that says it, but it's like, if you bring a brick and I bring a brick, we can build a cathedral on stage together. But if I bring a brick and then you bring a whole cathedral, then you don't need my brick. And I think it's the same way in GMs. Yeah. It's like, I can bring the whole cathedral, but that's a lot of work and you don't get much of an input. You just are kind of that reactive to it. Whereas if you bring a brick and like, I'm like, well, that's a brick made out of ooze. Great. What could we do with that? Is that yes and
cathedral?
Ooze cathedral. Oh, let's go. You know,
one of the like GM tools, like the principles and agendas, is to ask questions and build on the answers. And that's not unique to Absurdia. Like that's a common ethos in Powered by the Apocalypse games. I think it's really valuable to state. And in Absurdia, like it, as you alluded to, it's built into a lot of the mechanics. Like in the playbooks, one of the things you do is choose a friend and a rival. And as a player, this is like, I get to make NPCs. It's built into my playbook. I'm making NPCs and they exist in the world and I get to describe them. When you're talking about the factions in town and setting your initial ratings with those factions for your playbook, there's a questionnaire or a prompt in there that says, tell the table something that's true about your faction, a place, a rumor, a tradition, like, and so you're from character creation, you know, the players are not just invited by the GM, but invited by the game to say, I'm going to co-create this town.
And yeah, just to finish on the factions as well, like I've played for a couple of Powered by Apocalypse games, but I've yet, and maybe it's just my limited experience, I'll say, with Powered by Apocalypse games, yet to come across the idea of like having factions in a game, whereas you, the player, has that connection to it. So you obviously have 4 factions. They range from sort of like, you know, city council, sort of bureaucracy, community. You have, and then the sort of like the entropy at the end and the underbelly as well. So like the wide categories to have NPCs or locations or even the players connected to. And instantly what I liked about it, as well as obviously having, as you said, like prompts to like, how you connected to the other players and obviously making rivals and friends, is that you're connected to a larger organization that then has an impact on things. I think of like Blades in the Dark in a sense, is that you have all these, you know, hundreds, let's face it, hundreds of factions that, you know, you do one little thing, it sort of ripples out. Whereas here, it's like, okay, there's only 4 that you have to worry about. And they're very broad in terms of strokes as well. But I quite appreciate that because, again, it makes me feel like, well, of course, if you do one thing, then you're going to upset that, you know, the order of how things are going. And it's easy to get people into that mindset and also gives them like something to fall back on. Like, well, I'm part of this organization or a part of this sort of like faction. Here's their agenda, the 3 principles you have for each one of them. Right, I know where I'm going now. I just thought it was a very streamlined way of doing it without having billions of like teeny tiny, like you can put that within there, but under the umbrellas of these different factions. And I just thought that was just a really cool way of streamlining it, not only for the players but also for the GM as well, to be like, right, this new disturbance, well, it's going to be connected to this one, but it doesn't mean it's going to be friends with it, you know, friends with that faction. It's going to be impacting everything. And I just thought that was a really cool way of just putting it out simply, which I know maybe sounds a bit trite perhaps, but I just thought it was just so accessible. As someone who's come from those crunchy games of like Blades in the Dark and all these hundreds of factions that you have to keep sometimes in your head, and you're like, ugh.
You know, I love Blades. I love all the factions. But I, you know, for this game I did, number one, I mean, you could get more granular, like, you know, every department in City Hall could be a faction, or like, you know, like you could have different social clubs and community, or like you could definitely, there's a world where it could be more granular. But I, you know, as you alluded, I did want to keep it sort of high level. Factions in Absurdia they're not like organized groups with a hierarchy. They're loose coalitions of like different people and organizations, but they do represent an element that I really wanted to intentionally bring into Absurdia, which is like small town sort of social dynamics. Like there are sort of coalitions of interests, and they do jockey and shift across town. Like the factions aren't like at quote unquote at war with one another, but like, yeah, they're always looking for the upper hand. They might, you know, have little skirmishes here and there. In Absurdia, everyone, I'm using a lot of air quotes for this answer, everyone belongs, quote unquote, to a faction. But like how tied a person, they might not even consider themselves part of a faction. Right. You know, like, you know, other people might not, like they might not care about other people's factions. So like the more invested you are, like, or an NPC is, you know, the more they're going to care about other people's. But like everyone's sort of tied up in these small town politics. And, you know, connected to factions are faction moves. So when you engage with like larger groups, or like you engage on the premise of your reputation, the things that you have done. And that was really important to me, not just to capture those small town politics, but also to build, you know, a bigger, more robust system that existed outside of combat. You know, Absurdia's basic moves. Look, there's a fighting move. If you want to fight, it's extremely dangerous, but you can do it, or you might have to. Yes. But it's one move. And, you know, one of the things that I try to emphasize in Absurdia is like, there's lots of different ways to solve a problem. If you want to fight it, you can. You know, you can rally forces around town. You can like go searching for answers. You can get really weird and, you know, delve into the forces of entropy and swoon through the maelstrom and find answers there. But like, I really wanted to bring a more robust social dynamic system supported by mechanics to Absurdia to emphasize that non-combat element, and factions are kind of how I got to that point. Absolutely. And like one of the disturbances that is an example in the current PDF is the idea of having an election. And again, like I won't spoil it in case people don't know about it, but I love that concept of like, well, based around a couple of sessions around this idea of having an election. But then, if you're connected to a faction, they would want people to get the upper hand. And as you said, there's so much joy in having a game that isn't combat focused. I know that's like a very old take, let's face it, but being able to be like that is not the first option. And as you said, it's very dangerous. A lot of the disturbances, they aren't related. Like, I think it's just the monsters that are like, well, possibly you might have to fight this. But even then, you know, it is dangerous. And also there's other things you can do to do it. So I just like the stories we can tell aren't necessarily like combat focus. Again, we've been using Welcome to Night Vale as the big one here. I always think with Welcome to Night Vale, if you start listening to it and you have those repeating patterns, it's this idea of like you can slowly start to see these disturbances happening. And again, that taking your time to indulge in it, it's not all happening. It's not an action-packed sequence, you know. And so I very much appreciate that about this game, is that it's just taking its time, and that, you know, if the rush happens, then that's
possibly because of a disturbance of some sort, and then you're already in it. And rather than that quick lead up and like that montage to get ready and prep, that it's not going to happen. It's just yeah. I just thought it was really, really cool. My final sort of question to you, obviously, like you said, you've got the funding campaign happening.
Yes.
What can we look forward to? You've always mentioned one or two little things. Is there any sort of stretch goals we can look out for, or anything that would excite people? If they've enjoyed listening to this interview, is there something that you're like, oh, please come check us out to get a copy of Absurdia?
Yeah, absolutely. So the principal goal of the campaign is a print run. The game, the 1.0 version of Absurdia it's written, it's edited, it's play tested, as you've heard. There's some amazing, wonderful full page illustrations by Kaylee Rowena, who is just immensely talented.
Really gorgeous artwork. Really, really gorgeous.
Thank you. Yeah. So there are going to be 3 new playbooks coming. There's the newcomer I already talked about. A trope so common in absurdist media that I'm embarrassed I didn't work it into the original game, but there's a new one called the animated. So your animated object, or sentient toaster dancing and singing candelabra, like BMO from Adventure. Like they're everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, a new one for the bureaucracy faction called the Suit, which is maybe the most like setting original. It's sort of inspired by like the Sheriff's Secret Police from Welcome to Night Vale, and like various sort of Men in Black media, the spooks from American Gods, the Silence. But it really draws from like this trope of the faceless bureaucrat, where you literally play the suit. You're the suit on a faceless, like unimportant bureaucrat, and you are the suit. It's kind of a cross between like a bureaucratic paladin and like a Batman kind of vigilante. It's brilliant. It's a deeply ridiculous playbook. So yeah, I'm very excited. Those 3 are going to be coming. There are going to be some stretch goals for the campaign. It is my first crowdfunding campaign. I've tried to be really, really clear-minded and realistic about it. I've talked to a lot of folks in the industry, Blinking Birch Games, Ron Rick and Deckard, Plus One XP, like just trying to get my head on straight and make sure I'm doing this right. But I do have some stretch goals that I am very excited about. The first one is additional artwork. The game does have some incredible artwork. I would love to bring more in the interior pages. That's going to be the first one. And then, as I alluded to, some guest writers to bring some ready to play disturbances and some outside perspectives, some other takes on Absurdia for the book.
Amazing. Oh, well, thank you so much, Quinn, for coming on and talking to me about Absurdia. As I said, like, I haven't played too much in terms of Powered by the Apocalypse games, but as soon as I was reading Absurdia, I was like, oh, I know exactly what the tone is. You've hit it right. It's very clear in its message. And I can already see how exciting and interesting it could be, both for one-shots and for longer-term campaigns. So thank you so much. Where can we find your work? If you're on socials, where can we find that? And yeah, if there's anything else you'd like to recommend, please go and do so.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Fiona. I love talking about Absurdia, and it's just great to chat more about games in general and actual play. Yeah, so Absurdia is going to be crowdfunding on BackerKit on September 17th through October 17th. Got a good 30-day campaign there. There should be a link in the show notes, I believe.
Mm-hmm, yep.
Outside of that, for future works, I'll probably, as I did with Absurdia, be doing digital editions first. So I am on itch, quinm.itch.io. And in terms of social media, pretty much just Blue Sky, at Quinn Majeski, Majeski, at bluesky.social.
Oh, where can we listen to Monster Hour? You've already got a series about Absurdia. Where can people go and listen to it?
Of course, yeah. We are at Monster Hour Pod on most social media. We're not on Twitter or X or Meta anymore, but you can find us on Blue Sky and Instagram. I guess Instagram is Meta. But you can find us on Blue Sky. And then Monster Hour, pretty much wherever you get your podcasts. We are everywhere. We are 14 episodes into season 3 at this point. But if you want to hear Absurdia played, you can go check out season 2 or Monster of the Week season 1.
Yeah, if you've really enjoyed us talking about urban fantasy, go hit up Monster Hour. Thank you so much, Quinn. Thank you so much. Like I said, best of luck. And fingers crossed.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm hoping to do more of these special Q&A bonus episodes in future, including Q&As on the one-shots we've run here at What Am I Rolling? If you have a question, or think of an RPG designer you'd like to see interviewed on this podcast, just let us know. Our email address is whatamirollingpodcast@gmail.com. And that's it. Great. See you next time.